Good morning. Welcome to you. If you got one of these things, on the back you can see 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism. There's some people, I grew up through you, and people are like, well, that's not really a religion, is it? I mean, you guys believe whatever you want? It's like, no, we don't believe whatever we want. We believe what we must. And we figure out that as we go, and we do that in community. So, direct experience, we did that in September, words and deeds. And then wisdom from the world's religions. Last time we were looking at Taoism and how that could affect how we think and believe. So today, just in time for Hanukkah and Christmas, we've got the 4th source, Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. And I remember when I first came across this, I was thinking, well, I don't really love myself that much, so my neighbors aren't really getting that great of a deal. Right? So, Judaism and Christianity both talk about the Sabbath. So let's mull over this Jewish idea of the Sabbath and how it might apply to us right now in this environment, in this time we find ourselves living in. So, when I was in my early 20s, I was Christmas shopping with my mom, and we kept putting it off, so it was pretty close to Christmas, and we ended up driving to the suburban mall. And where we lived in Maryland, there would be some snow and slush and ice, and it would be hard to park the car. And if it were busy, which, of course, a few days leading up to Christmas, it was very busy, shoppers would get jostled by other shoppers, and there were long lines to check out. And this was way back in the 20th century, way before online shopping, no home delivery, just not, you wanted something, you had to go to the store, you had to find a parking spot, and loving your neighbor as yourself when they just jam into that spot you were just about to turn into. Yeah, thanks God. So I was trying to be polite, but I always, I'm in my 20s, but I'm also a bit grim, like this shopping business was something I had to do before I could just go home and relax. And I couldn't find things that I liked, and I couldn't find things I thought other family members would like, and so I was frustrated. And my mother, I guess trying to cheer me up, points to some Christmas store display and asks me what I thought. Of course, I'm being a bit grim, and I didn't bother to look really carefully, and I just said, I just hate this. And apparently, I said that just loud enough that the neighbors, the people around me, heard, and they looked at me like I was the Grinch who's just trying to steal Christmas, right there. I wasn't loving my neighbors. I wasn't loving myself. I think now what I really needed then was some Sabbath, especially some of that Sabbath mood that we heard Bev talking about a few minutes ago. So now where does this Sabbath thing come from? What does it mean? Well, you've heard of the 10 Commandments, and if you've got kids going to school in Louisiana, you may hear a lot more about that. So God gives these 10 Commandments to the Hebrew people via Moses, and they show up in the books of Exodus and Deuteronomy, and it's the 4th commandment. It's so odd. Keep the Sabbath holy. Well, how do you do that? Well, 3 parts. Number 1, stop, rest, and connect. The word Sabbath comes from Shabbat, which means stop, quit, stop working. Not only you, but your family has to stop working. And the Hebrew Bible says your kids, your manservant, your maidservant, and especially your slaves. Even your farm animals have to stop working. Anyone inside your gates has to stop working. Now, in the Bible, God works and creates for 6 days, and on the 7th day, God takes pleasure in creation. And creation is the very first thing the Bible calls holy. Now, God has no regrets, no need to work overtime, no need to make creation better than it already is. The Jewish tradition tells us that since God rested on the 7th day, so should we. And this means no work on that 7th day for a whole day. Stop and rest and connect with creation. In Exodus, when God gets around to the Ten Commandments, the one about the Sabbath is kind of the most puzzling of all. I mean, everyone understands the one about not killing. That's pretty straightforward. And the one about honoring mom and dad. Even little kids could understand those commandments, but this Sabbath thing? In Deuteronomy, the commandment to observe the Sabbath is tied to the experience of a people newly released from slavery. Because slaves cannot take a day off. A free people can. The Sabbath. Stop, rest, and connect. Stop working. Rest to show you are not a slave to your work. Connect with creation, connect with God, connect with what is truly important in your life. But for the Hebrews, the Sabbath was more than just once a week. It was also the sabbatical year, every seventh year. Imagine the field of ancient times. In the seventh year of farming, an Israelite lets a particular field of his lie fallow. It means to let the field rest for a whole year. Every year, for 6 years, the farmer worked that field, but now for a whole year, the soil won't be worked. It will look idle. It will look unproductive. And it will get fertilized by the farm animals, and a year later, it will be rested and ready for a new crop. You have to let a field rest every once in a while, or it will stop producing the way that you want it to. That's the Sabbath year. And in the olden days, and sometimes even now, teachers and ministers would take a sabbatical year because you wanted them to stop and rest and connect. You didn't want to work them to death, and you wanted to give them time to learn some new things and then bring that learning back to you. In order for them to be really good for you, in order for you to get the maximum return, you had to send them off on some adventures. Just, every once in a while. But does this idea of the Sabbath make sense anymore? I mean, it's one thing to let a field lie fallow for a year if you have a bunch of fields and you don't understand crop rotation yet. But can you imagine taking off a whole day every week and for Sabbath? Not for recreation. No. Now, what's the difference between the two? I mean, other than not work, what's the difference between Sabbath and, say, recreation? So here's one way to think about this. Recreation is a distraction from work. Sabbath is an attraction toward celebrating creation, celebrating life. To get to the Sabbath mood, we have to stop and rest and connect, and not forever, just for a time. I mean, for one day out of 7, could we stop? Stop buying things, stop working, stop reading the news. One day a week. I don't know. Just for a little while, stop. Stop acting as if the world cannot live without your constant attention. Stop acting as if the world will not go on without your analysis, your criticism, and your Facebook postings. Just stop worrying just for a little while. Stop, rest, connect. I mean, sit down, be quiet, rest just for a little while. Take a walk. Promise yourself you will try to refrain from speaking while you are on your walk. Don't speak, just for a little while. And take a walk as if it were the first walk you had ever taken. A walk in a foreign country. You can walk through a part of town here you haven't been in before, and you look around. Mysterious. You look around, you see the view, and then you remember to breathe. You look around for a place to sit down, and then you sit down without talking and stop and rest and just take it all in. Connect. This is what I call the Sabbath mood. You just stop, rest, and connect. In Jewish law and custom, you are to connect with God, and Jews are exhorted to go to synagogue and read the Torah. But the holiness of the Sabbath is also made manifest in the joy people experience on that day. Yes, joy in the Sabbath. Joy in finding the time and then experiencing the time of stopping, resting, connecting. Now, pay attention to this next part if you are part of a committed couple. In the Jewish customs of the Sabbath, it is a good deed for married people to have sexual intercourse on the Shabbat. I didn't make this up. It's in the Bible. Now for everyone else, well, there's taking a walk, with loved ones, reading. These are good too. And they are not meant to be distractions from work, but attraction to creation. And Sabbath not only gives us a rest, but the things that we use, the buildings, the tools, they get a rest. The earth itself gets a rest from bulldozers and pavers. And Sabbath also reminds us, we do not cause the grain to grow. We do not cause the paint to dry. Nor do we cause the wind to blow. And yet, is it reasonable to take a whole day off every week and not do anything that's considered work? I mean, nothing. No gardening, no shopping, no practicing your cello. And if we can't take a whole day every 7 days, maybe we could take something shorter and more frequently. And if we can't take a whole year every 7 years, can we take something shorter and more frequently? I like to meditate a few minutes every day, especially if I have too many things to do. I find I'm much more productive if I just stop and meditate. I don't think I could meditate for a whole day. I mean, I've gone to those retreats, but that is just super, super tough. So we might not feel right or able to take a whole day as a Sabbath, and we certainly might not be able to feel like we can take an entire year without working as Sabbath. But the benefits to the people around us, family, strangers, when we stop and rest and connect and then come back, the benefits to them are amazing. So maybe we could take, from time to time, a micro sabbatical. Let's say you and another person or two, but by yourself might be best. You take a short walk to an unfamiliar place with hardly any other people around, and you take this walk with a vow of silence. You agree not to say anything once you set out upon your walk until you come to the end of the walk. And so you walk. And you see things. And you smell things. And because you can't talk, or you've chosen not to, for that brief time, you're taking it all in. The humidity of the day, the passing clouds overhead, the smell of pine needles, the sound of leaves or gravel or sand crunching under your feet. You take it all in, and when you connect, you can feel whole. And just for a few moments, at peace, you have uncovered the Sabbath mood. It doesn't have to be every 7 days or every 7 years, but in my experience, you kind of have to plan for it, these micro-sabbaticals, or at least be open to it. Sometimes we get a clue that it is time to take that micro-sabbatical. About 10 years ago, I was at a Unitarian Universalist district meeting in Oklahoma City, and I was riding my motorcycle home. It's kind of a long ride from Oklahoma City back to Houston, maybe 7 hours on a good day, depending on your route. And then I left a little early because there were thunderstorms moving in Oklahoma City. Then the heavens opened up and the rain fell down. It felt almost biblical, the amount of rain. And after a little while, it turned into one of those slow, steady, probably lasting all day kind of rains. Of course, I was on this big Harley-Davidson motorcycle coming home to Houston. But after the deluge, that slow, steady rain wasn't going to be enough to make me stop, really. I wasn't going to give up. But it was enough to completely change the ride home. I had a rain suit on and a good helmet and boots, and I was going 45 miles an hour on the interstate Sunday afternoon, and there was not much traffic. But there, after a little while, I was in the wide open spaces of North Texas. Not a 7-hour trip anymore, more like 10 or 11. I didn't have any radio or music playing. It was just me on the motorcycle, and I felt safe. I was in the middle of nowhere with plenty of gas, just the sound of the rain. I was not getting wet at all. And the sound of the relentless rain pounding the highway pavement, and I was completely dry in a rain suit, and I could see and hear outside of the rain suit. Have you ever been in a car and it is just absolutely pouring? And in the car, you kind of feel like you're in your own world, and then there's the outside world. And you're just so grateful for that space. You know, you feel comfortable. You feel a little bit privileged. There's you in the interior of the car, and there's your little environment, and then there's this huge, big environment that's out there. That's how it felt, only I wasn't in a car. I was in this rain suit on this motorcycle. And I was completely dry, and I could see and hear, and I felt safe looking out at the world through my visor, and I had no distractions. No radio, no phone. And since I had to pay attention, but not in an anxious way, I was a perfect candidate for what happened next. What happened next was that micro-sabbatical mood came to me gently, thank goodness. And not only was I inside this rain suit, feeling the cool rain around me, riding the motorcycle carefully, but it felt like there was an observer not only inside the rain suit, but somehow there was an observer observing me, being inside the rain suit, observing the outside world. And as I was observing this man on the motorcycle, who was riding in the rain on his way home to his partner and his children, all of a sudden, I felt like I was part of something much larger than this guy on a motorcycle in a rain suit cruising down a North Texas highway in the rain at 45 miles an hour. Stop, rest, connect. So I pulled over at a rest stop, and I sat down on a bench, resting, and there was no one else around, and yet I felt connected to God, to the universe, to everything. Have you ever felt like that? Just completely awake, relaxed, and connected to something much larger than yourself? Because that is what I wish for you, especially in the next 30 days, a micro-sabbatical, when you need it. What I wish for you during this holiday season is the gift of peace and quiet. So there was this dad with small children, and he was distressed, and his children wanted to get him the perfect Christmas gift. And he only said, when asked what he wanted, as parents sometimes do, I just want the gift of peace and quiet. Well, kids didn't know what to do. I mean, you can't just look in the catalog. You can't just go online and buy the gift of peace and quiet. But his oldest daughter, she figured it out. So Christmas Eve, which is when they opened their presents, Dad gets a small box. So they all watch as he opens it. And inside the box is a candle holder, and some matches. The oldest daughter goes and turns off all the lights in the house. He opens the small box, he lights the candle, and there it was, the gift of peace and quiet. That is what I wish for you. And that is what I wish for me. To make the time to stop, to rest, especially to connect, and to listen to that voice, still and small, deep inside all, singing. Amen.